Ready? Okay. Let's do it. All right, folks. I think we've worked out all the kinks. Welcome, everybody, to National Park Seminary Ballroom. This is a big night for us. We've been waiting a long time to host this event. The real star, of course, is our Auditorium Orthophonic Victrola horn. I have to look at my notes when I say that because it's such a long word. Basically, in layman's terms, don't kill me, Mark, it is a speaker. And it went with a record player, phonograph, that was on the floor where you could access it. And that initially stood over behind the second column there. It was a big mahogany piece of furniture. This sound system, if you will, was installed in National Park Seminary in 1927. It was used by the students for music appreciation courses and recreational dancing among the students, as well as more formal affairs like the senior promenade through the room and dances, balls, that kind of thing. Some with men, some where the students did without and were each other's partners. And after the school closed in 1942, the speaker fell into disuse. The horn fell into disuse. And I'm sure we'll hear that, it basically broke down and degraded, and fortunately has now been made operable again. And we are very glad that beginning in 2015, SOS, Save Our Seminary, reached out to the Antique Phonograph Society, and they are based in California, and they put me in touch with a guy named Mark Lynch, who had a 301 area code. I'm like, wow, okay. And Mark is going to be our first speaker tonight. However, before we were able to do anything, it took a few more years, but we did commit to fixing the horn in advance of the 30th anniversary party for SOS. Some of you may have come to that in 2019. Prior to that, we had Mr. Dave Zeller, who's our second speaker tonight, come in. He repaired the speaker, donated his time, and his company donated donated parts to get it done. And at the time, we reconnected with Mark so he could be here when the repairs were going on and be among the very first to hear it work. So we used it in 2019 for our anniversary party, and we're like, wow, this is amazing. So we scheduled a dance for March 2020. Say no more, exactly. So finally, we're here tonight to celebrate the horn's return to service. So I'd like to introduce tonight's speakers. Mark Lynch is a recorded sound historian. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, and a Victrola specialist. And of course, David Zeller is the man who made the horn work again. Mark's background is in mechanical engineering and manufacturing, but his passion is the history of early sound reproduction equipment. And you can see from his displays some of his equipment that he's brought for us to look at. He restores and maintains an extensive collection of mechanical and early electrical sound reproduction equipment and recordings that were made prior to 1940. He's an active member of the Antique Phonograph Society and a contributor to the early sound recordings to the Library of Congress's National Jukebox. He also performs with the traditional Appalachian string band, both at local dances and just for fun. So without further ado, Mark, you want to come up?
Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm an engineer, not a public speaker, so you'll have to forgive me with that. And do you all know what this is? This is a sock, all right? And if I start talking too much, you've heard the saying, put a sock in it? This is an early volume control right here, which literally was put in the horn to make it quieter. So if I talk too much, let me know, okay? Okay, so we're here tonight to talk about this Auditorium Orthophonic Victrola in the back of the room here. Orthophonic, who's a Latin major here that can tell us what ortho and phonic means? Okay. Okay, Dave in the front here. Okay.
Ortho, upright or correct or straight.
Okay, also living.
Living. Oh.
Okay, living and phonic sound. So living sound. So they were trying to develop a sound system that was living, that was true to form, and that pursuit has not ended. It's continued. This is 1927, and Dave can tell us that it's still ongoing. They're trying to make sound closer and closer to real life. Okay? And we're getting there. Each time they say, we've got it. So 1927, this was made by the Victor Talking Machine Company in Camden, New Jersey, okay, and installed here in 1927, okay. So tonight we're going to talk about various, let me give you a brief summary. So we're going to talk about the Auditorium Orthophonic that's here in the seminary and in general that were installed throughout the United States. This is one of 150 installations, and it's the only one known to still exist. So it's a pretty rare piece of hardware, okay? Originally, it would have been connected to a turntable and electrically connected with the horn up in the mezzanine box over here, okay? So tonight we're so the Victor Talking Machine. Why would they call it a talking machine, right? What's that all about? Why would you call your company a talking machine company, right? Well, it's because for the same reason a can opener is called a can opener and a computer is called a computer, right? It's the function of the whatever it is you're talking about. So the Victor Talking Machine Company made this orthophonic horn here, and also a whole line of home versions, smaller ones that would fit in your parlor at home, okay? So we're going to talk about Victor Talking Machines. We're going to talk about Edison phonographs, okay? We're going to talk about the Bell and Taylor graphophones, okay? And we're going to talk about the earliest one, which is the phone autograph, okay? These are all trade names for their particular device, but Victor chose a more generic name, the talking machine. Edison owned the phonograph patent and so forth. These other guys had trade names on their products. In the United States, we think of everything sound-related as being a phonograph now. But actually it was a capital P trade name of Edison. It was owned, that was his patent name. In England, they call them gramophones, right? But again, that was a patented name, big G, gramophone. Anyway, okay, so that's me. So in 1993, I came down here for the first time. Was that 30 years ago? And the reason I came, let's see if we can make this work here, which is right. Okay, this is a trade journal put out by the Victor Talking Machine Company, sent to its dealers to give them information about new products and demonstrations and window displays and new records and the whole thing. Anyway, I own this machine on the cover here, also made in 1927, very deluxe, fancy machine. So I bought this Voice of the Victor magazine, which I think you have copies, Bonnie made for you guys. And I'm looking through this thing, saying, oh, that's interesting. And I come across this article, a distinguished customer. Okay? And I say, that's just down the road from me. I live at Dennis Avenue up here on Georgia Avenue. I said, that's a mile from here. Let me walk down there. And SOS was giving some free tours at that time. And I got on the tour, and we walked around, and I went in, and I said, my God, it's still here. Okay? So that's how I became involved in that. So 1927, there's the original installation it had a blue silk screen across the front, and it had nymphs painted on the blue silk, and birch trees and so forth would cover the mouth of the horn there. Okay? So that's how I got involved in this right here. There's a close-up. Again, not in color, but you can kind of see the birch trees and nymphs, and that was created again by the Victor artist to match other decorations in the room here. Okay? Okay. This was not the only installation. Again, there were about 150 of these installations throughout the world, throughout the United States. Here's the dance hall in Ohio. Okay, and that was Victor would send out engineers to survey the site initially, to figure out what the best location was and so forth for the horn, come up with blueprints, and then make the installation. So it was popular for a dance hall. Okay, here's another one in Flint, Michigan, an amusement park. Okay, here's a demonstration off the coast in Atlantic City. Okay, that's Miss whoever it is down there, standing in the horn. You can see how it's big. It's almost 8 feet high. Okay. Victor had a showroom, kind of like the Apple Store of its day. They had a showroom in Atlantic City where vacationing people could go in and look at the latest whatever. And then they'd order it, and it would be shipped to their local dealer, kind of like the way Martin Guitars does with their guitars. You visit the factory, and anyway. So there's Miss, whoever that is. Miss it. Yeah, there she is, getting blasted inside of the horn there. Okay. This is in Camden, New Jersey. This is a 30-foot tall working auditorium orthophonic on top of one of the buildings in Camden. And it was used the first time. There's a large bridge, the Benjamin Franklin Bridge that goes from Philadelphia to Camden across the Delaware River. And the bridge opened in 1927. Coolidge is there marching across and so forth. And Stars and Stripes Forever are coming out of this huge Victrola. And it's an exact model of one that stands 4 feet tall, not 30 feet tall. So that was another example. This is a fancy mansion in Philadelphia. And Dave, tell me the name again. Okay, Stowsbury Mansion, and he was so wealthy that he had one record player and 4 of these horns throughout his house. Okay, and we believe one is behind that tapestry there. Okay, how many rooms in that? 145. Okay. So 145 divided by 4. So anyway, he didn't anyway. But that's the mansion in Philadelphia. Here's an outdoor installation at a park. You can see the machine there. I think this is in South America. These were sent to Seville, Spain. There was a exhibit there, U.S. government exhibit. It was sent to Mexico City. There are a number of other ones that may still be there throughout the world. So if you're visiting, take a look. Okay. All right. Here's another installation, a large ice skating rink. Another one in Ohio. Okay. The world's largest, so they needed music in there. Okay, and this is just a line drawing of the horn, exact horn back there, and you can see the size of it relative to the serviceman there. Okay, and the machine the horn up here is an R-E-4A. That's exactly what is behind you right now. So that's the blueprint of that drawing right there. Okay. 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 It wasn't possible to record sound at one time. The sound was ephemeral. As soon as you stopped speaking, that was it. Nobody could hear it again. It was gone, right? So people had to make it themselves, right? So we're going to get back in a time machine. 1853, we're going to get in H.G. Wells' time machine here. And briefly, we're going to go back, and I'm going to give a quick synopsis of the development of sound recording between now and 1927. Dave, I'm not going to go beyond 1927, okay? And then we'll come back and talk more specifically about this installation here, okay? So 1853, we're in our time machine. We set the flux capacitors, whatever they are, on this thing, okay? So this is where, who invented sound recording? Does anybody know? Thomas Edison?
Alexander Graham Bell.
Okay. Who was the first? Okay? The first man who could record sound is this French man right here. Okay? He worked 1853 to 1860. He was making sound recordings, but he had no notion of ever hearing them again. He invented sound recording, not sound playback. Okay? Edison did invent sound playback, and he did it independently of the work that Edward Scott de Martinville did. Okay? So here's a guy in France working in 1853. He wants to make what amounts to a speech-to-text translator. Okay? He invents a machine that will record a sound wave on a piece of paper, and he wants to look at that piece of paper and say, that says, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, by reading the squiggles. Okay? He didn't want to have to write it down. He wanted it to be automatic. Okay? So he invented something that he called a phone autograph. So a sound self-writer. Okay, he was making something that would write sound. And this is what his machine looked like. Essentially a horn, if you will, like we got here, and a vibrating membrane at the end, and a drum with some paper that had soot on it, and a little bristle that would wipe the soot away to make a line. Okay? All right? There's a modern replica of one right now that was made probably 10 years ago, but that's it. And you can see the hand-cranked cylinder there, and on that would be a piece of lamp black or soot paper, and a little bristle on the end of that, and it would etch or sweep a little groove into the soot and leave a line. And then he wanted to pick it up and say, oh, that says cat, and that says dog. Okay, so he wanted to make it automatic. So that's what he was up to. Okay? This is what his etching looks like. Okay? This was preserved in the Academy of Sciences in Paris. Okay? Survived several wars and so forth. Nobody knew it was there until about 2008. Okay? The lamp black soot, by the way, was fixed to the paper by dipping it in alcohol like you would with photograph. Okay, so the soot remained and the lines were preserved. Okay, so there it is. Okay, New York Times, 2008, headline front page. Okay, 17 years before Edison, this French guy recorded sound. And not only that, but in modern times, these researchers who were able to play the song, play the recording back using computerized techniques to look at the groove and say, oh, that is Au clair de la lune, okay, dot, 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 dot. Anyway, so that was quite revolutionary that for somebody that had not intended to ever hear the sound again, here we are 100 and some years later, hearing the voice of a dead guy, okay? Pretty remarkable. Okay. 1877, Thomas Edison, famous inventor, right? Here he is in the Matthew Brady studio. He came here to talk to the National Academy of Sciences about his new invention, the phonograph. Okay? The phonograph. And all famous people went to the Brady studio to get their picture taken. So here he is in front of his phonograph. This recorded on a metal foil, a tin foil phonograph. I have an example over here that you can look at. Okay? Whoops. Okay. There's what his first one looked like. Again, a replica here. For those of you don't know how a phonograph works, this sort of explains it maybe. The groove can either go side to side or it can go up and down, hill and dale or laterally. Yep. Okay, 5 minutes. We got to move fast here. Okay. I have one of these over here you're welcome to listen to. Okay, some cylinder records. About the size of a Coca-Cola can. They were sold a lot of times in rural areas in the grocery stores. Okay? Different formats, disc, large cylinders, 2-minute, 4-minute, different length cylinders and so forth. Okay? Okay, so that was Edison. about 10 years later, Alexander Graham Bell, who just won a prize for inventing the telephone, gets some prize money. So he opens something called the Volta Laboratory in Washington, D.C., and he gets his cousin and another fellow to do some research in there, and they come up with another recording technique. They wanted to partner with Edison, and he said, "Nothing doing, it's my baby, go away." So these guys invented something called the graphophone, okay? They switched the words around, okay? And again, this is a wax cylinder machine right there, graphophone, okay? So this was in, again, Washington, D.C., District of where? Columbia. So that's where this Columbia name comes from, okay? So that's Columbia Records, okay? And they made disc records later on, too, okay? Emil Berliner, okay, he was a German immigrant, also in Washington, D.C. D.C. was the recording capital of the world at one time, okay? This guy invented the disc gramophone, this time like the Grammy Awards, okay, gramophone, using a laterally side-to-side disc. Oh, 2 minutes, we got to move here, okay? A Berliner patent right here and a kind of a diagram of how the reproduction would happen there, okay? Here's an early recording studio. Okay, there's a motor down there turning a turntable, a bottle of acid, a guy accompanying on the piano, and the fellow with his hand singing, right? Okay. Okay, so there's the Berliner gramophone. Hand cranked. Wasn't hand wound, it was physically powered by your hand. Later, a spring motor. Okay? And that's what his record looked like. There were 7 inches, that's just the label part. It wasn't square, okay? But the label there, it hadn't come up with paper labels yet, so it was actually stamped right into the record itself. Okay, another hand-wound one. Okay, Victor talking machine. Okay, that brings us up to the company that made the Auditorium Orthophonic back here. Okay, 1901 they were founded using some of Berliner's ideas, and in fact he was one of the early principals, and they came up with spring-powered phonographs. That's wrong. These are talking machines. Okay? Spring-powered. Why would they use springs? Why didn't they just plug them in? No electricity, right? In 1928, only 30% of the homes in the U.S. had electricity. This is 1901, okay? So it was pretty rare. They did have some electrically operated machine, but they were battery operated, okay? Spring-powered, a deluxe and so forth, with the horn on the outside, okay? Later on, they said, those horns, they collect a lot of dust. Let's put the horn inside the cabinet, make it look more like a piano, more like a piece of furniture where a dignified person might have something like this in their house. Oh, 2 minutes, okay. Okay? And these are some very fancy gold-leafed, multi-woods and so forth, and a more standard mahogany one in the middle. Come on now, move. Okay. Local record company. Look at the name of this outfit in Frederick. Temple of Fancy. Wouldn't you like to shop there? Okay. Temple of Fancy. Okay. Come on now. Okay. The orthophonic Victrola, for almost up to this guy right here. So sales had plummeted for talking machines by 1925 because people wanted radios, okay? Radio was a new thing. Everybody wanted a radio. They didn't want these old-fashioned phonographs. So Victor went back to the drawing board. They partnered with Western Electric and Bell Laboratories to invent a horn that increased the fidelity by 2 times. It was twice the frequency range of the earlier stuff. And that's what this horn back here is patterned after, okay? Higher fidelity and so forth, okay? Heavily advertised. Victor was almost out of business at the end of 1924 until 1925, which is where we are here. They came up with this orthophonic system. mostly for home use and mainly for advertising is why they made this huge one, okay? There's a tone chamber that you can look at. I have a clear model over here that you're welcome to look at where the sound path continually changes in there so you can put a 6-foot horn in your living room without it sticking out. So they were able to fold it up. The ladies like that. Okay, 1925, here's how you made records. You had a horn, you put the loud guys in the back, you put the soft guys in the front. Okay, you made the recording. You didn't know what it sounded like for a couple of days until you processed the recording and listened to it. There was no instant, and there was no editing. If you made a mistake, start over again. Okay? No equalization other than moving the people around. Let's move the piano back a little bit. Okay? Okay? A violin guy. Okay. Anybody know who this is? Okay. This is the only picture I could find. Anyway, microphones entered the recording process in 1925. Okay, pretty far along in the series, and the sound that they could capture was enormously bigger. An orthophonic reproducer went along with the new electrical process. This is the 4 series of home machines, anything from I think $275 down to $85. You could have one at your house, okay? This is an automatic orthophonic, the first home record changer. There are pictures I'm going to show you later. There was one on the ballroom floor here that the girls could operate that's mentioned in that article that you have there, okay? Well, that's a picture of it there on the ballroom, okay? And that's the inside. Electrical pickup and the record changing parts right there, okay? There's me 30 years ago in this room, okay, before I got my top hat. That's when we showed up here. Okay, quickly, I know we're over time here. History. So this is the Girls' School Almanac. There's a lot of good information in here. So this is the part specifically about this one here. So that is the, right there. There's some... They aren't students. I don't know that they're dressed like that. Anyway, okay. So the one here was purchased by Ogel, Del Moy and Company in Washington, D.C. That's who sold this equipment to National Park Seminary. That's their building, and that's one of their delivery trucks to give you a sense of the time period, okay? Okay, I found this in the archives. This is in the Victor information, $8,705.66, okay, in July 1927, okay? Up top is how much you'd have to come up with now, right? So not an insignificant amount of money. And that was the whole installation, the horn, the screen, the console, the whole thing, okay? So contrast that to the price of a Model T Ford in 1927. Okay? The number in the middle is how many they made and the price on the right here. So again, to give you an idea of the value and the cost of this, of what Dr. Ament, the director of the school here. Okay? So that's a Model T Ford. However, the girls that went to school here would have shown up in a Stutz or something like that. These are about $3,500 here, okay? You wouldn't be caught dead in that, okay? All right? Okay, so here we are. We're going to wrap it up here. So the first console is right there. It was installed behind the third column over here, okay? So that's the first one, big thing, place of records and a single play turntable, okay? There's a close-up of a girl touching that. She wasn't supposed to do that. They probably had operators, okay? All right, fire. Big Bertha is what they called that thing. Big Bertha in ruins, okay? In 1928, somebody probably left it turned on, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, the whole place was filled with smoke. Okay, so they called the fire department, and they put the poor thing out of its misery. Okay, if you read in there, it talks about that. Okay, So they got another one. They got a replacement. They had insurance. They got another one, a little smaller. Okay, so that's the second console there. That's a close-up. Okay, that's the inside. You can see the original carpet and so forth. Okay. Okay, Army years. Okay, the school was taken over by the Army. The Walter Reed needed space, so they took over the school. Take a look at the shadow on the bricks there. What do you see? Soot, right, from the fire. Okay, if you look over there now, you'll still see it. Okay, you'll still see that soot. Okay. Victor had a chief physicist that came up with the notion of how to make the auditorium orthophonic. There's a whole row of speakers behind that curved panel right there. And that's essentially the principle that's used right here in this horn. Multiple single speakers and then a reflector. Yep, almost done. Okay. In some year during the Army ownership of it, they modified it. They took out the original equipment, okay, because it probably burned up too. And their expedient was to rip out the multiple speakers and put two speakers that they connect to a radio, and they had sound, and they were happy with that. And you can see the insider right there. Okay, that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I feel so bad for rushing Mark along because he told me I had 100 slides. I'm like, we're not going to get through 100 slides. That was terrific. I actually learned a ton, and I appreciated all the humor throughout the talk. And I know folks want to get to the dancing, but that was worth it to me to listen to all of that. I did not think you were going to say this was still the only one known about in the U.S. I figured there would be more. Our second speaker tonight is Dave Zeller, who is an Emmy Award-winning television broadcast engineer with a specialty in audio engineering. His professional experience spans over 35 years and includes work in music recording studios, audio production for television, engineering roles at 6 Olympic Games broadcasts, and installations at a dozen federal agencies in and around Washington, D.C. So when we go out and get speakers, we get the best. So we've got Mark, we've got Dave, and of course, most notably, Dave is the co-designer and installer of the equipment that is in our horn that made it operational once again. So Dave, you want to give a quick overview of all the good stuff you did to make tonight possible?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming to this convivial event. Thanks also to Mark Lynch for his excellent presentation, and to Bonnie and Ann for organizing the whole affair, and to Steve Devoni for setting up and running the projector and the camera, and there he is. He's a resident. So my name is David Zeller. I'm a broadcast engineer by trade, but most of my background is in audio engineering. And for the last 4 decades or so, I've worked in a variety of engineering capacities. In the 1980s, I was the only member of my high school rock band who could figure out how to connect and operate the PA system we rented from the local guitar shop for our basement cafeteria dance concerts. I later attended the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida, where I was a student in the music engineering program at the School of Music there. And there I learned that nearly everything I did to that poor rental PA system was wrong. In the 1990s, I moved to Los Angeles. Whoops, we're still on this slide. Sorry. In the 1990s, I moved to Los Angeles, California, where I worked as an audio maintenance engineer at a handful of high-profile music recording studios. These were the days when the recording industry was undergoing quite a few changes as new digital audio technology was replacing analog tape machines. So part of my job was to keep the old legacy analog equipment running, while also integrating the first generation of digital tape machines, consoles, effects processors, computer audio recording and storage, and methods of digital audio transmission. In the early aughts, I transitioned to audio production and post-production for television. I became chief engineer of a company whose specialty was recording and mixing live band performances during major annual televised award shows, comedy specials, music concert specials, and DVDs, all in a couple different flavors of surround sound. And in the late aughts, I moved to Maryland, got married. My wife and daughter are in the audience. I started freelancing for an audio-video broadcast integration company called Lab Tech Systems, whose owner, Eric Winokur, is in the audience somewhere over there with his beautiful wife. And I worked for NBC Sports on the broadcasts of 6 Olympic Games from Beijing, China in 2008 through Pyeongchang, South Korea in 2018. My full-time job these days is as a contractor at the United States Department of Justice headquarters in Washington, D.C., where I am the broadcast engineer for the multimedia section, in charge of all in-house video productions, including live press conferences, taped and virtual remarks, award ceremonies, and other functions such as seminars and conferences. I say all this not to toot my own horn. Get it? At the horn, way back, that big thing back there? No. All right, okay, I'll move on. So not for self-aggrandizement, but just as a nod to the variety of audio systems that I've encountered through my career. One sometimes gets to the point where one thinks one has seen everything and done everything, and then I saw this. It was February of 2019 when I received an email from Bill Moore, the owner of Technarts Engineering, the company for which I worked then and continue to work for now. Bill wasn't able to attend this evening, but he sends his fond regards. That email, with this picture attached, basically said, "What is this? And let's make this work again." I didn't really have any other context at the time, other than Bill mentioning that this was a vintage loudspeaker installed in a ballroom in an old hotel that then became a girls' finishing school that was also occupied for a time by the U.S. Army. I remember at the time thinking that this speaker thingamajig must have been, about 2 feet by 2 feet or something like that, and there may have been 2 or 4 or 6 of them around the perimeter of the ballroom, which was a common distribution arrangement for large enclosed spaces. But the picture clearly depicts an acoustic horn loudspeaker. But the fact that it was divided vertically in half was, I thought, novel. My own biases steered me to assume that the structure of the horn was possibly fiberglass, painted and textured to resemble natural wood. All these conclusions, I'm not ashamed to say, were wrong. As were my preconceptions about the ballroom itself. The character and the grandeur of the seminary ballroom took me by surprise, to say the least. I mean, honestly. Right? I think it's called the Great Hall, the great room, the ballroom? The Grand Hall. Thank you, Frank, yes. Frank's in charge of all things. Many of you kind folks are residents here, and so you're used to all this. You're used to the awestruck, mouth-gaping reactions of first-time visitors to this wonderful place. So anyway, my email correspondence continued, and for my first visit here in 2019, I was given instructions to meet Bonnie in the tunnel. Already sounding interesting. As I allowed my GPS navigation system to help me locate Linden Lane and DeWitt Drive, I noticed a distinct variety of architecture. That house is a Victorian, but that house over there looks like a Swiss chalet. And there's a Japanese pagoda and a Dutch windmill and a Spanish bungalow and an English castle. And then I found the tunnel, an almost hidden portal that allows automobiles to pass through the building, almost directly under our feet. Is that right, residents? Are we almost directly over the, pretty close, okay. So Bonnie gave me the most pleasant wave and smile, letting me know that, yes, I was indeed at the right place at the appointed time. And I drove in and parked. I drove through the courtyard, complete with elegant statues and old-growth trees and meandering paths and a convenient parking area. I was Alice, and I had found the rabbit hole to Wonderland. All right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Upon arriving and meeting Bonnie and Mark and Frank, we climbed the scaffold that had been erected, and we were able to get a good up-close look at the National Seminary Victrola Auditorium Orthophonic speaker, model type number RE-4-A, serial number 100, manufactured in the late 1920s by the Victor Talking Machine Company in Camden, New Jersey, as Mark mentioned. This was no mid-sized, off-the-shelf fiberglass horn. As Mark mentioned, this is one of such surviving instruments in the United States, possibly the world. But how did it work? And what was inside? And how can we best resurrect it? First of all, we can redefine orthophonic. We've already done so I'll move past it. But it was a term used to describe not only the devices used to record and play back sound, but the method of recording the sound. It was used in both senses. So what is a horn? The name horn comes from the use of animal horns and conch shells to help amplify speech or tones. These are pictures of some examples of animal horns. The properties of these natural horns were conscripted well before the acoustical mechanics of horns were understood in terms of physics and mathematics. Later, and up to the present time, horns have been built specifically for musical instruments in many shapes and varieties, but always for the same basic purpose of amplifying acoustic sound and focusing the sound's propagation toward the intended listeners. Perhaps you've heard a trumpet player warm up with just the mouthpiece, detached from the body of the horn. With the same pressure and embouchure, the sound of the musician's vibrating lips coming out of the mouthpiece is weak and tinny compared to the tone once the mouthpiece is coupled back onto the horn, and thereby imbued with rich character, tuned frequency, and directionality. Perhaps you've also heard a Victrola record player. No doubt you have. And if you haven't, there's one right over there. But it's the same basic principle. It uses, without electricity, the horn to amplify the minuscule vibrations of a needle following a tiny groove on a vinyl disc or record or a wax disc, and it can delight a room full of listeners. And that the upper right-hand picture is an electron microscope photograph of a needle in a groove. So from that size scale, without electricity, horns can increase the efficiency of sound transmission by that much. But still, how do they work? A horn is a physical structure with several specific acoustic properties. Horns increase the efficiency of delivering acoustic energy from a vibrating membrane in or just behind the throat of the horn, through a tapered neck by a distance known as the axial length, to the mouth of the horn and the air around it. They achieve this boost in efficiency using a few concepts. Number one, the transmission medium of sound is, of course, the air. And since air is fluid in all three dimensions, sound propagation tends to emanate from the source in all directions. One function of a horn is to impart directionality to a sound source, focusing it toward an intended direction, ultimately toward a listener, thereby redirecting acoustic power toward the destination instead of dissipating in all directions. Concept number two, horns accomplish a coupling and matching of the disparate physical impedances of a small, dense, vibrating membrane to the voluminous, soft, pliable air. The high material density of a vibrating diaphragm meets a narrow column of air, sometimes in a small airtight compression chamber, whose properties are more similar to the diaphragm itself in that it's small and a little bit more dense, and then gradually expanded through the length of the neck of the horn until the sound waves propagate into free air, which has a low material density. Concept number three, the axial length of the horn is directly associated with the wavelength of the sound, which is also the frequency or the pitch. And that's the pitch, which is at which the highest efficiency of amplification is achieved. By changing the axial length of the horn, it can be optimized for a particular range of frequencies, with longer horns more effective at low frequencies and shorter horns more suited to high frequencies. And changing the taper or flare of the horn influences the tonal character of the instrument. Over the decades, there have been hundreds of variations in speaker horn design, each one attempting to optimize a particular characteristic of the amplified sound source. Very often, multiple horns with different dimensional parameters are combined in a single loudspeaker cabinet, in order to accurately and efficiently reproduce the full frequency range of speech and music. Of particular interest to speaker designers is eliminating the honky or pinched sound quality often attributed to horns, especially in a variety called the compression horn. Endless experimentation, calculation, and computer modeling are routine engineering techniques employed by speaker and horn manufacturers today in order to optimize sound quality and efficiency. Back to this slide. Our Victrola horn is a type of folded horn, as Mark already mentioned. Sometimes referred to as a reflex horn, but technically that's not quite correct. The two bottom diagrams on this page, I went to the wrong page. There, the two bottom diagrams on this slide depict folded speaker horns. Folded horns achieve a long axial length by zigzagging the path of travel. For our auditorium orthophonic horn, the axial length is about 7 feet. But rather than a 7-foot-long horn sticking out into the middle of the room, the structure is folded once and divided vertically into 2 equal left and right lobes, allowing for a cabinet depth of only around 3 or 4 feet. 2 minutes. Oh my goodness. All right, we're going to skip forward to this slide. All right, so we verified all this after identifying that the front center section of the horn was a purposeful access panel, meticulously crafted to match the grain and contour of the cabinet. And after a brief prayer to the speaker gods, we carefully unscrewed the original brass mounting screws and lifted the panel away from the main unit. And the pictures show what we found inside. 2 old mismatched speakers, apparently installed by the Army, and a new plywood mounting board had obviously been fabricated. You can tell from the photographs that the 2 12-inch speakers are mounted facing backward, directing sound toward the rear of the horn cabinet. Next thing Mark and I did is what we've been doing for decades. We took the whole thing apart. So after removing the 2 speaker drivers and the speaker wiring, we were able to peek inside the structure of the horn. Peering inside the throat and past some fiberglass batting acting as acoustic damping, we confirmed the folded nature of the horn. You can see a point about a foot back from the driver mounting plate that the neck of this horn is intentionally and gracefully divided vertically in half, creating equal left and right lobes. The curve of each lobe forces the sound waves propagating from the backwards-facing drivers to conduct a gradual about face, emerging out of the left and right sections of the cabinet's front face, all the while exponentially increasing in cross-sectional area. The left and right lobes then recombine at the front plane of the cabinet, and sound waves are directed forward into the air volume of the ballroom. Or at least, sound waves would be directed into the volume of the ballroom if there were working speaker drivers and amplification and a little audio signal processing connected to a microphone and a music playback device. It was at this point that we were able to more fully realize some design criteria and constraints for this project. Let's see here. We decided that the horn structure should remain as close as possible to original, or at least in situ. Reworking all the wood structure would require a skilled woodworker with sensitivity to 1920s aesthetics and construction techniques, and this was beyond the scope of the project. But thankfully, the wood itself was in excellent condition. None of the screw holes were stripped. There wasn't any wood rot. The plywood mounting panel, though not particularly pretty, was robust, and by some miracle, we did not find a family of raccoons living inside the thing. The horn electronics we decided to replace with modern components. It is thought that the original Victrola Auditorium Orthophonic horns were fitted with 4 6 or 7-inch DC biased speaker drivers mounted in a vertical line on a narrower throat mounting plate. But original drivers proved impossible to find and would have required some restorative woodwork, and we already decided not to do that. Plus, the new mounting board, which is technically called a baffle, offered speaker cutouts with diameters compatible with modern components, 12 inches. We replaced the speaker wiring with new speaker cables that terminate to a new location. We found the speaker end of the old wires, but not the cabinet end. It snakes somewhere through the room, through conduits, most likely. And rather than sourcing vintage equipment to make the horn work again, we decided to go with modern, more reliable equipment. 2 new 12-inch speaker drivers would be installed on the modified baffle, We chose the EV928B concentric two-way speakers with wide frequency range and a power rating of 200 watts and a standard 8 ohm impedance, and as close to a point source as possible. What is a point source? It's defined by the term concentric. Concentric means that that the tweeter, the high-frequency tweeter, which is the little tiny brown dome in the lower left picture, is mounted in the middle of and directly in front of the woofer, which is the gray paper cone. This places the drivers pretty much as close to each other as possible, which is called concentric and also coincident. The advantage of this point source arrangement is that the high and low frequencies receive more or less equal treatment and steering by the horn. If they weren't concentric, the difference in distance between the high frequency driver and the low frequency driver might get scrambled more so in the horn and create an unexpected and possibly inferior frequency response.
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, let's skip to the next slide. So, before we tidied everything up, we did some testing and measurements with the new speaker elements mounted in the horn. So we put the speakers in the horn, we put the top back on, and we used a couple measurement microphones and test equipment to measure the response of the horn. And you can see in the scaffold photo, if you look close, there's the mic stand kind of in the scaffolding with the mic pointed right in the horn, so we could measure the horn itself without the additional contribution of the room, acoustics, and distance. We ended up using an audio processor called Converge, and the world's smallest 4-channel mixer, and a power amplifier. I won't go into those details because we're out of time. And here's the functional drawing of the system. Here's one little tidbit, though, worth noting. First of all, this is not rocket science. This is very basic signal flow as far as audio design goes. But an interesting tidbit is that you might be able to see that, I don't know if you can tell. Yeah, you can tell. As the signal moves from left to right, from device to device, you'll probably notice that there are 2 audio signals preserved the entire way through the signal chain. There are discrete left and right channels, which means, in a sense, this giant folded horn is operating in stereo. Well, not exactly. The horn itself is mono, not stereo, since the sound waves from both speaker drivers are acoustically combined in the throat of the horn and all the way through to the mouth. And the horn emits a combined mono output. Plus, stereo sound is normally configured with a left and a right speaker. But in the revitalized National Park Seminary Victrola Auditorium Orthophonic horn, the left channel is the top speaker, and the right channel is the bottom speaker. So if we connect a 2-channel stereo music source to the mixer, that music will be reproduced in the 2 speaker drivers in stereo in the horn, and then combined to mono. Who knows, but I would like to think that this perhaps lends a tiny bit more spatial depth to the horn, and a tiny bit more enjoyment to the listeners in the ballroom. Realistically, this is probably imperceptible, but it's fun, well, at least for a geek like me, to know that there's just a little something extra going on. Perhaps it's my personal gift to the ballroom, something for the horn to think about, now that it has awakened from its decades-long silent hibernation. All right, well, there it is. That's the story of the National Park Seminary Victrola Auditorium. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay. You're there.
What was the first song you played?
The first, it was Beethoven, right? Where's Frank? The first thing we played, I think, was Beethoven's Ninth, the 4th movement. I know we went for something grand. Mark has asked if he can play sort of a comparison of what sound would sound like prior to this. 1906, and then we will turn on our horn. You want to?
This is a empirical approximation of the logarithmic curve that Dave is describing up here. Somebody just carved this out to make it look.
So we're just going to.
So it was sort of gradually expanding, but they just kind of figured it out by hook or by crook. Okay. I'm going to play about a minute of this, and it'll give you a sense of 1906 before you hear the 1927. Okay? This is a recording called, it's an advertising record recorded by Len Spencer of, again, Washington, D.C.
We don't have to crank out.
Phonograph, created by the great wizard of the New World to delight those who would have melody or be amused. I can sing you tender songs of love. I can give you merry tales and joyous laughter. I can transport you to the realms of music. I can cause you to join in the rhythmic dance. I can lull the babe to sweet repose, or waken in the aged heart soft memories of youthful days. No matter what may be your mood, I am always ready to entertain you. When your day's work is done, I can bring the theater or the opera to your home. I can give you grand opera, comic opera, or vaudeville. I can give you sacred or popular music, dance, orchestra, or instrumental music. I can render solos, duets, trios, quartets. I can entertain your
So that was a little comparison, and then of course we've got today's technology.
Yeah, completely mechanical, no electronics.
And now, well, first of all, let's give Dave and Mark a round of applause, please. And I really apologize for rushing everybody through. I know that was not exactly pleasant to have us waving numbered fingers at them from the back. Not just the one in the middle, I promise. But we do want to let you hear what we're here for. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to switch off the modern mic, or the mic to the modern speakers. And without further ado, we're going to listen to the #1 song of 1927 by Hoagy Carmichael. It's called Stardust. If you'd like to dance, we invite you to go ahead.
Sometimes I wonder why I spend the lonely night dreaming of a song, the melody haunts my reverie, and I'm once again with you. Our love was new, and each kiss an inspiration. Oh, but that was long ago. Now my consolation is in the stardust song beside a garden wall. When stars are bright, you are in my arms. The nightingale tells his fairy tale of paradise where roses bloom, though I dream in vain. In my heart it will remain my stardust melody, the memory of refrain. Though I dream in vain, in my heart it
everybody.